Now, before anybody gets immediately very angry, I will point out that yes, Christian is not generally regarded as on the same level of people like Daniel Bryan and Kurt Angle, the two wrestlers that I've done already in this wonderful little series. In fact, his recent AEW debut sparked a debate over whether Christian's even that good. Is he even good, guys? Yes, he is good. Very good. But that's just my opinion. Your mileage may vary, but generally, amongst wrestling fans, he's regarded as a very good wrestler, but not quite on that elite level. But in recent weeks, we have heard a lot of wrestlers come out and say Christian's pretty much one of the greatest ever. There's a certain difference between fan favourite all-time greats and industry favourite all-time greats, and Christian definitely falls into the latter category, alongside people like Randy Orton, for example. Real wrestlers. So on one hand, you've got our favourites, considered amongst the elite in the world today, people like Okada, Omega, Ibushi, Ospreay, and so on. But then you've got industry favourites who may on the surface seem to be a lot less flashy than the names I've just mentioned. Industry favourites, especially in the West, tend to be incredibly consistent, very solid, dependable, and good at the unseen things that normal fans like you and I may not necessarily pick up on. And then a month or so ago, we saw Cash Wheeler's recent tweet where somebody asked him, why do you even find Christian that good? And he just listed off things, handily broken down into categories, some of which are similar to my 5 categories today. But I'll just read the tweet. He just went, his personality, his footwork, his psychology, his ring positioning, his mind for the business, his ability to elevate his opponents unselfishly and make them look better than they are, his passion, his willingness to help younger talent, his seamless mic work. But that's it, really. Ooh, sass from Cash Wheeler. Sass Wheeler. I'm not going to be following all of these because, you know, it's hard for a non-wrestler to pick up on some of those things. And also, you don't want to hear me attempt to break down Christian's footwork for 5 minutes. But on the other hand, I am going to be using some of them because they're just evident when you dig a little beneath the surface of what makes Christian so great. So, at a time when Christian's relevance is at a bit of a high once again, and that debate has resurfaced over whether he actually is that good, let's do him some justice and let's find out why Christian is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. For my first reason, it just makes sense, I think, to start in the place that most people's exposure to Christian began, his elite level tag team legacy. Not that the name of his tag team was Legacy, that's different. His legacy as a tag team guy. He's a really good tag team wrestler. When you go on Christian's cage match profile and sort all of his matches by the general overall rating on the site, his top 6 matches are tag team bouts of some description. Not traditional 2-on-2 tag team bouts, but certainly multi-man matches. 6 of them. I mean, that's a big number. Now, 3 of those matches, of course, are the game-changing TLC matches that Edge and Christian had alongside the Dudleys and the Hardys. And in those matches, a lot of the big signature moments don't necessarily feature Christian. You think of things like Bubba Ray Dudley flying through a stack of tables, Jeff Hardy jumping off high things, Edge's insane mid-air spear, but Christian doesn't really come to the surface as often as some of the other names in these matches. But that's because Christian's kind of the glue that holds everything together in these matches, which is almost as an important role as the big high spot, certainly for laying the foundation of the match. For the first half of the WrestleMania 17 TLC match, which is many people's favourite of that series of matches, he feeds and bumps for like everybody in just the opening segment. He takes a double flapjack from the Dudleys, the Hardys both climb a ladder and jump off onto him, and he's selling like hell, and he's making everybody else look really good. But then, and this is a word so often associated with Christian, he also takes the match's most underrated bump. Everybody is on ladders in the middle of the ring, he ends up toppling off, so does everybody else, but he falls out of view of the camera, clean over the top rope. It's not clear how he's going to land, but it doesn't look correct, and it's really, really terrifying. And this bump, for me, kind of sums up Christian as a tag team performer. Everybody else bumps off the ladder in full view of the camera, we see how they land. Christian's the only one who disappears out of camera shot, and that's a nice little microcosm for me of Christian's career at this stage. So it's nice to see that at the end of the match, he is the one who gets the glory by pulling down those tag team titles all for himself. He'll share one with Edge, but at that moment, it's Christian's moment, with a little bit of an assist from Rhino, just a little one. Now you might say, yes, Edge and Christian have had these insane, wild, hardcore, stipulation-heavy tag team matches, but they haven't had any classic 2-on-2 tag team matches, you know, bare bones, get in there and wrestle. And why is that? And because they've not had any of these really that I can think of off the top of my head, why are they considered one of the best tag teams ever? And why is Christian therefore one of the best tag team guys ever? But I think that's a little bit of an unfair argument, because at the time that Edge and Christian were enjoying their heyday as a tag team, the Attitude Era, WWE wasn't too big on having regular work rate heavy tag team matches, such as modern day promotions, because it's kind of in vogue right now, like AEW on the NXT brand and in places like Dragon Gate, for example. I mean, there were a few, you know, two-man power trip against Benoit and Jericho being one of the obvious examples around that sort of time frame, but generally it just wasn't what was cool at the time, so Edge and Christian had to forge their tag team legacy through something else, which is actually our second point on why Christian is so great. His personality. People often talk about Chris Jericho and how he is able to reinvent himself, and has done so with amazing success so many times throughout his career. More so than just about any other wrestler you can care to think of. I mean, you've got the super bratty, whiny heel in WCW, you've got the egomaniacal guy making his debut in WWE, who then turns into a bit of a cool babyface, who then turns into the Ayatollah of rock and roller, and then somewhere down the line he becomes serious suit-wearing, honest man Jericho, and then meta, never-talking Jericho, and then list Jericho, and then Painmaker Jericho in New Japan, and then the current Inner Circle version of Chris Jericho. It's mind-blowing really what he's been able to do. But Christian, I feel, has been able to do something similar with his various different gimmicks and the personality. He's been able to lend each one of those things in a more understated way, perhaps because often he's just been in less prominent positions than Chris Jericho. But whereas Jericho often carried elements from his previous personas into future characters of his, and it led to often a bit of a more fluid career arc, I suppose, Christian's been kind of all over the place. He's been, I think, possibly forced into more jarring transitions, maybe just because of less creative control over the course of his career generally. And that makes it really impressive that Christian has been able to portray each version of his own persona so effectively, despite some of them being very wildly different from the last. I mean, with Edge, as we've already mentioned, they were kind of the heelish lifeblood of a tag team division alongside the Dudleys and the Hardys, who didn't really talk a lot by comparison. But with Edge and Christian, they packed so much personality into everything they were a part of, from the 5-second poses, the heelish promos on the crowd, the kazoo antics backstage, interactions with the likes of Kurt Angle. They brought entertainment wherever they went, in a bit of a reminiscent way to the New Day some, 15 years later on. I mean heel New Day. I'm not stupid. When New Day were heels. And then Christian had to play a very difficult role actually, that of the jealous tag partner watching his best friend be kind of singled out for success and starting to grow apart from him. And it started off kind of gradual and subtle, and then the tension built and built until finally they snapped and broke apart. And then the whiny kind of tantrum throwing Christian as well, and the sidekick of Chris Jericho Christian, which is actually one of my favourite versions of Christian, if we can use the word versions, I suppose, without upsetting Matt Hardy. That included maybe my favourite opening of a Royal Rumble match ever, the 2003 Royal Rumble, when Christian disguised himself as Jericho to fool Shawn Michaels and get him eliminated straight away. Very inventive stuff. Then, of course, a little bit further down the line, we had a character that Christian had never really attempted to portray up until that point. This very slimy character, turning on Chris Jericho, stealing, I guess, Trish Stratus from him, although she was very much complicit as well, and just generally being a different kind of heel to the goofy, almost lovable character we'd seen him portray a few years beforehand. I'm using the word portray a lot, and I'm going to try and stamp that out right now. Then we had Impact Christian, when he jumped from one company to the other, where he was far more relaxed, far more himself, you felt, still very naturally likeable, but in a totally different way. Then we had heel Impact Christian, this undefeatable, cheating heel with the help of Tomko and AJ Styles, just getting on everybody's nerves. And then, of course, he returned to WWE and settled more into that veteran role that we kind of view him as today. And once again, these are not a kind of natural career progression, are they? He's kind of jumping around all over the place, and it's a real testament to his personality that he was able to do so with such success. They don't call him Captain Charisma for nothing. But of course, it's not just personality that gets Christian so much respect among his peers. We also, of course, have to talk about his in-ring psychology, his amazing grasp of in-ring psychology. So now we're going to take a bit of a look at what many people consider to be the greatest feud of Christian's career. And it came a little bit later on in his career as well. I'm of course referring to the feud with Randy Orton in 2011. And we were so happy at the beginning because he'd finally won that World Heavyweight Championship, beating Alberto Del Rio, and then the very next week on SmackDown accepting a title match against Randy Orton. Christian, no. And this first match was just a glimmer, just a bit of a glimpse of how great this feud was going to be, although I still suspect we didn't really understand how great it would turn out. The finish is obviously really noteworthy here. It was a face versus face match with the crowd, or the smarkier elements of the crowd, openly rooting for Christian, and the finish involved him leaping off the turnbuckle and falling straight into an RKO. It's a finish that's done quite a lot these days, but back then it seemed pretty unique. It also led to that famous gif from a future match between Orton and Christian, where he goes up to the turnbuckle again, fakes jumping off but hangs onto the ropes, and Orton throws up the arms for the RKO, but Christian's got him. He's totally faked him out. Brilliant stuff. It's the sort of thing that really only people like Christian and Orton could think of. So good, in fact, that many years later, AJ Styles would do the same thing in that match with Orton. Remember when he hopped up pretending to go for the phenomenal forearm, but then just popping back down onto the apron and Orton fell for it totally. Greatness inspires greatness, I suppose. Then we get possibly the best match of the feud, certainly one of the two best matches of the feud in my opinion, at Over the Limit 2011 when Christian's trying to get his belt back from Randy Orton. And this match is all about the counters and the reversals and knowing your opponent inside out. And there's so many great examples of this in the match. One that springs to mind straight away is Christian going for his super indie thing where he steps onto the apron and keeps half his body on the inside of the ring and does a little kick upwards over his own head. But Orton just catches him, spins him round and hits that draping DDT. You've got, for example, Christian going for the spear in tribute to Edge, but Orton hitting his nice lightning fast power slam. And you've also got Orton hesitating on the punt kick, and that hesitation allows Christian to nip up and finally nail him with that spear. Not nip up. He's not Shawn Michaels, he gets up, he springs to his feet. And these sort of moments achieve two things, and these all came in the same match, remember. They are really unique and fun ways of connecting the specific movesets, the very recognisable movesets of either man, and making it into something that we've never quite seen before. It's really good, it adds loads to the match, but the key thing is that it makes sense in the context of the bout as well. And each one of those moments totally 100% does, and that is where I think part of Christian's greatness shines through. Orton won that match. They then had another rematch, a Capital Punishment, which featured Christian now as a heel, which wasn't a very popular heel turn because everyone loves Christian, but at the same time they did a really good job of adapting the dynamic between them to suit the needs of the booking. The finish was really good because in the build-up to the match, Christian had apparently given Orton a concussion, which Orton was still recovering from in kayfabe, and Orton was really selling the head a lot in the match. Christian was obviously targeting it, and then right at the end, Randy used that, playing possum, to pretend that he was more hurt, more stunned than he was, allowing him to catch Christian with one of those RKOs out of nowhere. Again, Christian's not just great at utilising in-ring psychology when he's on the offense. He doesn't just plan these cool moments or co-plan these cool moments for himself. It's when he's getting his ass kicked too, and I think that's really important. Then we got a match, of course, at Money in the Bank 2011, a show that people have talked about to death, and a match that people have talked about quite a lot as well. It's the one where Christian forces Orton to DQ himself, essentially, and that passes the belt because of the special stipulations of the match to Christian. That's really good as well. Quite short. I think it only goes about 10 minutes or so, but it did the job, and it led to an absolute barn burner of a blow-off match at SummerSlam. And this one had so many great moments in it. This, alongside the Over the Limit match, was probably the best match of this feud. By this point, we really knew that both guys knew each other inside and out. We knew how much they'd done their homework. They'd both been really good students. But because of this, because we already expected counters and everything, they really took their time with it in this one and really allowed their personalities to come through a lot more. So you've got that moment where Christian is preparing to hit Randy Orton with an RKO on the announce table, which everybody knows is going to be reversed. Look at Christian's grin there. That is a man who is about to get slammed through that table. And he does, and that's the right decision, because great psychology doesn't always have to be a surprise or subtle. Sometimes the obvious course of action is the best one. It doesn't always have to be complicated. But we do get a surprise one when both men crawl out the wreckage of the table, get back into the ring, stagger backwards into each other, and then Orton, because he's Orton, just goes for a snap RKO. But Christian out-Ortons Orton. He then reverses that into a flash unprettier for a very convincing near fall. He's out-Vipered the Viper. The Orton has become the Orty. I should write these down more thoroughly before I say things. And of course we got the famous finish to that match, mirroring the finish of their first one on SmackDown when Christian first lost the title to Randy. He goes up top again, leaps off, Orton hits the RKO, but this time onto some ring steps that are positioned in the way, which again is something that's been done a few more times since, but at the time it was really cool and unique. Now despite that being an amazing feud, which everybody enjoyed a lot, it still leaves a bit of a sour taste in the mouth for Christian fans, because he kind of got dominated quite a lot. He was losing most of the matches, getting a DQ win, and Orton really was the better man in that feud. It was kind of one-sided when you really look at it. But that's another one of the great things about Christian. So we get on to number 4, his selflessness. Not selfishness, selflessness. It's the opposite. They should make that word more different so people don't get confused, because I nearly said the wrong thing. Christian knows how to make his opponents look great. He is one of the best at that in wrestling that I can think of. And that's all well and good when you're in WWE at a very popular time surrounded by iconic figures who fans want to see dominate anyway. But how does that work when Christian becomes a big fish in a smaller pond when he jumps to Impact? Well, it didn't happen for a while. Christian went on a 2-year run from his debut in Impact, or TNA as it was then known, without being pinned or submitted in a match. He didn't lose a match by conventional means for 2 years. Then he came up against Samoa Joe. And it would be very accurate to say that Samoa Joe dominates this match. Samoa Joe, obviously, a very big deal in Impact at that time. Christian, though, was the bigger star, wasn't he? He was coming in from WWE, and while the cool indie kids might have been like, Samoa Joe's going to kick his ass, I bet a lot of people were tuning in thinking, no, Christian's got this. He's the bigger figure in the wrestling industry at that time. And Christian and Joe and whoever the booking team was at the time all realised this is a real passing of the torch moment. We're going to let Joe get so much offense in. And Christian takes these big moves from Joe as if his life depends on it. He really puts his body on the line in this match. And it's a great example of why Christian is so selfless. I mean, he hits him with a suicide dive. Whenever Joe does a suicide dive, it's terrifying because there's so much weight and impact behind it. He lays him against the guardrail and just knees him through it. He also at one point busts out a corkscrew plancher of sorts, and Christian just takes it fully as this huge figure is spinning towards him. And then just a monstrous lariat as well. I have to mention that lariat, and the bump Christian takes off it is absolutely superb, 10 out of 10. Now, I've made it sound like Christian doesn't get much offense in this match. He gets some, but it's usually via cheating, sneaky heelish means, or when AJ Styles and Tyson Tomko get involved. And then they cause a bit of a distraction on the outside, and Christian can kick Joe in the balls or whatever. But man, Joe dominated a large portion of this match and got the win, giving Christian his first loss in Impact Wrestling. Muscle buster, coquina clutch, and not only did Christian, he didn't get pinned, he tapped out clean in the middle of the ring. So now we go to a month later, where Christian is now in a match with Frankie Kazarian. Once again, Christian is the biggest star here by a wider margin than he was in that match against Samoa Joe. And a lot of people did expect him to win this one. It was a ladder match. It seemed like even though Kazarian was a very nimble X Division kind of guy, Christian surely had this in the bag. And Christian gets his ass kicked again, not so much as in the Joe match. It wasn't as one-sided. This was more just two guys throwing absolutely everything at each other, but Christian makes Kazarian look like an absolute hero. Kazarian was a popular guy in Impact at the time, of course, because of his X Division exploits, because of his Tag Division exploits, but he was a bit of like a beloved regular. He wasn't some kind of new exciting hero like Samoa Joe was, in a way, even though he'd been around for a couple of years. Kaz had been there longer, people kind of accepted him, and I think that it was kind of maybe a bit surprising that Christian made him look like such a megastar, which is great. Again, Christian takes some big moves in this one. At one stage, he's holding the ladder on the outside of the ring and gets it kicked into his face, and then Kazarian just friggin' dives onto him, and Christian's face is busted open, and that's pretty early on as well, really adding to the drama of the match. At one point a little bit later, Kazarian just slaps him with the ladder, and Christian sells it almost like Shawn Michaels. He sells it all the way out of the ropes onto the apron, down to the floor, and then flops down to the ground. I love that sell. It's really well done. It doesn't look ridiculous. It's not SummerSlam 2009 Michaels. It's good Michaels, don't worry. And generally, Christian, throughout his career really, has proven that maybe his biggest strength is his ability to get his opponent over. Maybe that is a key reason why industry guys like him so much, because he's so selfless, they probably love wrestling him. Or maybe it's his second biggest strength, because now we get on to my fifth point, which I believe is perhaps the biggest reason that Christian is so great, and that's his determination. I mean, Christian, you know, he exceeded all expectations, I believe, in WWE. He was a tag team guy, but was very much the Jannetty of the tag team, which became evident when Edge got his push. And also, he was kind of in difficult circumstances because weren't there rumours going around, or it was reportedly said anyway, that Vince thought he was ugly? And I don't know. Guys, I'm no expert. Christian's a good-looking dude, right? And then you have to watch his tag partner and his best friend go on to become one of the defining heels of that era and win like everything there is to win in WWE, while he himself met a fraction of that success. And I don't think we could have blamed anybody for maybe giving up a little bit, maybe resting on their laurels, because it just maybe seemed like it wasn't destined for them. And that is why it was so brilliant when Christian finally got his hands on that World Heavyweight Championship, because he'd overcome so much to get there, and there was no doubt in anybody's mind that he 100% deserved it. And I think that doesn't get mentioned enough, honestly. Christian's determination meant that he was able to push through possibly quite a big disappointment of watching, yes, your best friend, who you're going to be happy for, but watching your tag partner go on to achieve amazing things, be given very few of those opportunities yourself, and yet still managed to make it in the end. And not only did he make his own dreams come true, but he helped so many other wrestlers along the way. Long may that continue in AEW, and I have very little doubt that that's exactly what's going to happen. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully, if you were one of those people who didn't really think Christian was that great, I've managed to sway you a little bit, but I am keen to hear everybody's opinions in that comment section down below. I've been Jack from Cultaholic. Stay safe out there, keep yourselves positive, and I'll see you very soon.